Guys, when we think about Cobra villains, I'm sure most of us are thinking Cobra Commander, maybe even Destro or Storm Shadow, but what if we were to double the trouble? Because while these guys are great solo acts, there's one formidable duo that takes the G.I. Joe universe by storm, and yup, we're talking about none other than the Crimson Twins, Tomax and Xamot. I remember being younger and realizing their names were actually palindromes, basically Tomax backwards was Xamot, and that blew my little brain out of the water. Now, they would rather rule from the shadows. In fact, even though they were affiliated with Cobra, there's no record of them being actual members. They're more into doing their own thing and creating an empire that's theirs. As leaders of extensive enterprises, they were like the corporate front of Cobra, bringing in all the power, influence, and of course, shit tons of cash. They basically just waltz around in the real world without raising an eyebrow. Hell, they even pass all the money and paperwork of Cobra with no hitch whatsoever as completely legal transactions. They have an uncanny ability to hide their tracks and those of their clients. And did you know that being twins means they legit have a psychic connection? In some versions, they even feel each other's pain. That level of synchronization low-key makes them even more dangerous. It's like you're not dealing with two separate individuals, but two bodies connected via one mind. And what's most interesting about them is that you rarely get to see a proper origin story for them. Most versions just show the twins when they're already formed and powerful, so we see them as dangerous and then have to figure out how they came about in reverse. But don't worry guys, we've already figured all of that out for you. We're covering every origin and life of the Crimson Twins, so you never have to watch another video on them ever again. It's going to be a long ride, so let's get started. Of course, we're going to begin with the OG Real American Hero version of these twins. Their first appearance in the comics was in G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero number 37, and from the very beginning you see exactly what we're talking about. There's no long emotional backstory. Mostly every character that's been introduced, including Destro and Storm Shadow, the comics always show their origins through flashbacks. This time, we get none of that. We just dive straight away into the present, where we see two muscly men wearing blue spandex suits with magenta pink capes, and of course, they're almost exactly identical, so how do you know who's who? Well, Tomax's hair is parted on the right side of his head, and Xamot's on the left, and even more intriguingly, there's a scar on Xamot's right cheek. In this issue, we see them both in an amusement park, carrying a trampoline and blending in, waiting for their opportunity to strike. And then, out of nowhere, they come across what seems like the G.I. Joes. You even hear one of them call the other Ripcord. Y'all know Ripcord, right? Our in-house jump expert among the Joes? Turns out, the Joes were helping out one of the girls at the amusement park who had to transport a bunch of balloons. The twins knew this would happen, and they had already hatched a plan with the Crimson Guard since they were its leaders, but they wanted some backup from the Cobra headquarters, just in case. So they call up HQ straight to the silver-faced Destro, and turns out they're already extremely busy. The commander wasn't talking to anyone, and their Springfield HQ was basically closed. That sounds frustrating, right? The very people you work for just decided to turn their backs on you. But these twins were just too confident in themselves and decided to move ahead with the mission without backup. After all, if they won, the rewards too would be just theirs. And, well, you can guess what happened after that. A super fun and stylistic battle breaks out between the Crimson Guard, led by the twins, and the G.I. Joes, including Blowtorch, Gung-Ho, and of course Ripcord. Half of the battle takes place in the House of Mirrors, and the other twin went straight to the roller coasters to sabotage the ride and claim victory. Of course, none of this went as planned. The mirrors, with all their reflections, somehow managed to save the Joes, who escaped from the clutches of the Crimson Guard. And, on the other hand, Xamot was on top of the roller coaster's loop, waiting for the Joes to come his way. His plan was to shoot straight through the bottom of the car, but he too was stopped by some backup Joes who dropped down from a helicopter. And this is when we get to see that the rumors were indeed true. When Xamot is hit or strangled, Tomax experiences the same. He feels the pain and even experiences the same consequences. And, in true brotherly fashion, he let the Joes go to save his own brother. Xamot was losing the fight, but the moment he heard his brother racing along the roller coaster, he basically just somersaulted off and was caught by Tomax mid-air. And then they both rode off into the sunset. This first issue appearance of Tomax and Xamot told us a few things. First, they're in charge of the Crimson Guards and they work for Cobra. And second, they didn't let anger or emotion drive them, but were rather driven by efficiency. It very clearly sends the message that these Crimson Twins aren't just Cobra henchmen, but rather they're executives who lead their own guard and are trained and ready to kill. It also showed us the unique bond between the twins, both the psychic one and the brotherly one. They were both super in sync with one another, but of course, as we've already mentioned, mention, they didn't show us how they actually rose to power or any of their origin story. Their origin more or less remains a mystery, and it just isn't anything that dramatic. They're just a pair of twins who got bored with warfare and decided to take the corporate world by storm. That pretty much sets them apart from every other Cobra villain in the franchise.
We'll destroy our enemies completely.
Sunbow changes the flavor. Then we got the Sunbow animated series, where Tomax and Xamot were introduced in the miniseries Pyramid of Darkness. From the very first episode of it, which was episode 11 overall, we see the twins foiling G.I. Joe's plans at a rocket launch, where they manage to capture one of the rockets with a cool-ass net. One more time, they catch a rocket going into space with a net. And the two are just as in sync as always, finishing each other's sentences. Of course, even here they're working for Cobra and are bringing back their catch to the commander, who seems to be pretty impressed that he's finally laid his hands on a G.I. Joe space shuttle. But have you ever seen the commander's plans work out, especially in the Sunbow series? Nope. No wonder everyone tried to replace him with Serpentor in Season 2. You see, the G.I. Joes were actually expecting the ambush and pulled one hell of an Uno reverse card. Almost Trojan horse vibes, a bunch of Joes fly out of the space shuttle and attack the twins. And once again, they establish that Tomax feels whatever Xamot feels, and vice versa. The Joes fully use this to their advantage and throw them into a river. We also see a pretty interesting facet of the Crimson Twins when they readily surrender to the Joes. Cobra Commander even calls them cowardly, but that's not to say you should underestimate them. These guys built water robots that pretty much saved both them and the commander from the hands of the Joes. Now, we're not going to get into the nitty-gritty of the episode, but basically, the commander, along with Destro and the Crimson Twins, plan on using the space station to create the ultimate weapon, the Pyramid of Darkness, under which no electrical field can survive, which means no weapons or vehicles, and essentially no Joes. For this, though, Cobra will have to put in place 4 huge-ass cubes in 4 different strategic locations, and in charge of one of those cubes is the Crimson Twins. Initially, they seem pretty tricky with their strategy of distracting the Joes and then going to place the cube, but their plan goes to shit when they're attacked by an army of skeletons. Interestingly, the Joes actually helped them out by squashing the skeletons, but their next target was the twins. As Xamot tried to activate the cube, the Joes jumped on Tomax, and of course, his twin felt the attack as well, but fortunately, he did succeed in turning the cube on. And as a beam of darkness enveloped the cube, Xamot ran away with the rest of the Crimson Guard, promising his brother that he'd return for him. Quite contrary to the comics, right? But don't worry, he did indeed go back for his twin. Of course, Tomax himself is smart and capable and escapes from the clutches of the Joes by using his Cobra insignia that momentarily blinds everyone with a bright light. He does eventually get captured again, but here's the twist. Tomax was low-key planning on getting captured again, and this time after a little bit of roughhousing, because that allowed his brother Xamot to feel and figure out his exact whereabouts. And it was, of course, the location of the 4th and final cube, the Sea of Lost Souls. What we like here is that their psychic link was no longer subtle or just some quirky gimmick. It's actually pretty central to how they operate, and they can even use it to their advantage. Now naturally, Xamot wishes to rescue his twin immediately, but Cobra Commander is definitely not on board with that plan, since he believes that his sentimental and emotional rescue operation might mess with Destro and Baroness's mission planting the cube. And this is where we get to see the true side of the Crimson Twins. Xamot doesn't waste a minute before reminding the commander that it's their company of extensive enterprises that has funded this entire mission. He ain't afraid of the commander and will do anything to get his twin back. Now that's more like it. And, of course, Cobra Commander has no option but to agree, and even promises not to start the cube until Tomax has been rescued. And, of course, he was just lying. Come on, guys, it's Cobra Commander. This dude has no loyalty and no heart. Xamot does save his brother before long, since they both knew the commander was bullshitting, and turns out they have a plan. They're not taking his treachery lightly at all. They've already made preparations to escape the darkness, and even have guards stationed at the space station Delta who will now take over everything. Honestly, consider us impressed. These versions of the Crimson Twins are more than ready to seize power for themselves, even if that means betraying Cobra Commander. Now, once they're in control, they confidently march right back into Cobra headquarters, command the commander himself. We've got twin masterminds in the house, and of course, things go wrong soon enough as the Joes take control of the space station, and naturally, Commander tries to blame the Crimson Twins. Even though the twins try to tell him that the Cobra Temple may be in danger and they should do something to protect it, Commander won't hear another word. And the Joes do indeed attack Cobra Temple, but Cobra Commander uses the Cobra Dragon and its rays to temporarily disable all of them and asks the twins to clean them up. But the Joes can't be defeated that easily, and funnily enough, the twins want none of it. Instead, they have a surprise of their own. Turns out, the Enterprise's tower is itself the ultimate weapon as it transforms into a battle rocket. Even though the Joes do foil their plans, this shows that the Crimson Twins have a mind of their own. They're pretty enterprising themselves, and they don't just follow Cobra Commander. In fact, the episode episode Money to Burn really shows us what the Crimson Twins are made of. They're not all about physical warfare, but prefer to use their wits and their weapons. In this episode, they plot to wreck the American economy by destroying currency, so basically economic warfare, which sounds right up their alley. And instead of attacking individuals or even the Joes, they attack the larger systems and structures. They're all about destabilizing the world in the smartest possible way.
Destro's treacherous assassination of my character go unchallenged, will you?
G.I. Joe the movie. When Cobra Commander stops being good enough. Now, in Season 2 of the Sunbow series, the power dynamics in Cobra shift dramatically. You see, people were just tired of Cobra Commander's sloppy leadership and constant failure, and honestly, we get it. So they decided to do something about it. Tomax and Xamot, without getting carried away by any loyalty or emotionality, chose the more effective side. They aligned themselves with Destro and Dr. Mindbender to create Serpentor. Honestly, in their minds, it wasn't really betrayal, just a strategic decision. Cobra Commander just wasn't effective any longer and thus had to be replaced. Interestingly, they also raised their opinions against Serpentor when he got out of hand and ordered an invasion of the United States. So clearly, they're never on the side of crazy, much prefer the side of calm and strength. And the Crimson Twins' approach carries over to the G.I. Joe movie, where they happily choose the side of Globulus and Cobra Law because they recognize it as the more powerful and stable side. After all, it was Globulus himself who created the Cobra Commander and made him who he is. You guys want to learn that story? You're gonna have to check out our video on every origin of Cobra Commander. And I mean, you should check that out anyway, because it's such a great video. Anyways, the Crimson Twins are ready to fight on the side of Cobra Law and take on the Joes in the final battle, but alas, an explosion pretty much blows up the entirety of this ancient civilization, and the twins had to escape. But did they? Well, that's kind of just left up to fate. But if you ask us, we think they did. They're pretty crafty that way, as we saw in the Sunbow series. Once again, not much of an origin story here either, unfortunately, and this is actually their only movie appearance. It actually genuinely pains us to say that these two psychic corporate bros haven't had an on-screen role in the currently released live-action film continuity. Reportedly, they were going to be some of the main antagonists in Ever Vigilant, but if y'all follow G.I. Joe news, you'll know that unfinished script has basically been lost in the void. The sequel was never made, and Tomax and Xamot still haven't had their official Hollywood big screen debut. Here's hoping that happens soon. Like, come on guys, we want our psychic business twins. But hey, at least this next version of the twins gives us a little more backstory about them. IDW's biggest reinvention. The Paoli brothers. Alright guys, now it's time for the big reveal because IDW takes Marvel's foundation, turns the brothers into fleshed out characters that are somehow even more menacing. Here, Tomax and Xamot aren't just no-name twins, but rather, they're introduced as the Paoli brothers who are from Corsica. And why are they even more menacing? Well, because in this version, they have explicit ties to some next-level organized crime. They've been members of the Union Corse and were even connected to the French Foreign Legion. Hell, they even served as mercenaries in Africa and South America. That's a pretty crazy rap sheet if you ask us, and you can feel their power and threat the moment you read G.I. Joe Cobra Special issue number 1. I mean, Tomax Paoli's first line is "Slavery is freedom," and he has this insanely creepy and threatening smile. Within the first few pages, they establish that Tomax and Xamot have this unbreakable connection. In fact, it's known here as the Corsican Syndrome, whereby identical twins are said to have a unique psychic connection. The comic also gives us a little sneak peek into the backstory of the brothers as they grew up in the Union Corse. That was their very first family, and they raised them to be nothing but soldiers. They were just kids when they put bullets in rebels who tried ambushing them in the jungles. Union Corse also trained them to be the businessmen they were today, joint leaders of extensive enterprises, always in tandem with one another. Eventually, they joined the French Foreign Legion and were enlisted during the Chadian-Libyan conflict. That's when they were just coming of age, so it's pretty natural that, having witnessed all this destruction and adventure, and considering the fact that they were still kinda kids, they thought the only solution to anything in this world was to conquer with guns and bullets. But this particular conflict gave them perspective. They realized that once the warfare ended, they neither had strength nor purpose. And the real winner of the war were the ones who hadn't actually invested a single body. It was the owner of the Toyota pickup trucks, without which the war would have been impossible. Imagine that. Not one casualty, just pure war profit. And that's when the brothers decided that it was time to put down their guns. So they ultimately started extensive enterprises by taking advantage of the ruins of Union Corse's contraband network and seizing it. And that's how they secured their place. Instead of investing in war, they sold security. Soon, hundreds of industries relied on them for their security. Eventually, they were approached by none other than Cobra, who showed them a whole new world to claim. But we see and hear all of this from the perspective of Tomax, who couldn't be happier with their rise to power as the leaders of extensive enterprises and his psychic connection with his twin. But Xamot, well, he had a story of his own. You see, everything was going well. Brothers were in lockstep and had a deep undercover G.I. Joe agent wrapped around their fingers. The agent was named Chuckles, and the twins, being identical, decided to play him like a fiddle by taking on the identity of Mr. X. Sometimes it was Xamot, and other times it was Tomax feeding useless information and manipulating Chuckles for their own gain. At least until their brilliant reveal. They explained to Chuckles that they had known about him from the very beginning and were just toying with him to break him psychologically. And I guess they succeeded, because Chuckles went on one hell of a rampage after that. He even pulled a gun on Tomax and attempted to shoot, but when the gun turned out to be loaded with blanks, he took the hot barrel of the gun and burnt Xamot's face with it instead. And that moment changed everything. After that incident left Xamot permanently scarred, his psychic connection with his brother was entirely altered. He felt angry, frustrated, small, and weak, and when he lay in his hospital bed covered with bandages, he realized that he could no longer feel a connection with his brother. He felt like he was falling apart, like he was broken. Even though his brother was near him, he didn't feel that sense of safety and security that he once did, and all of this took a toll on Xamot. He became increasingly erratic, dissatisfied, and at times even depressed. He no longer felt like he had purpose in this corporate world and wanted nothing more than to go back to the guns and the warfare. He didn't even care about extensive enterprises anymore. All he wanted was freedom. Freedom from these industries and even freedom from his brother. He could feel the distance between them growing, and while Tomax craved and enjoyed the power bestowed by Cobra, all Xamot wanted was vast and open fields. But here's the real tragedy, guys. Although, warning, if you like the sound of the IDW continuity and want to give it a read, we gotta tell you there's some serious spoilers coming up. You see, once someone gets a taste of power, no amount of it can ever be enough. It becomes like an appetite that can never be satisfied, and that's exactly what happened with the Paoli brothers. Things got really messy with Cobra as Xamot tried to set up the commander to be assassinated, and even though he knew exactly what was coming, Chuckles still managed to shoot the commander dead. Crazy, right? But that's not all. As Chuckles was making his way out of the base, he reached the nuclear-armed submarine where Xamot was waiting. And though Xamot called Chuckles a brother in spirit, Chuckles had had enough. He saw Xamot as the enemy too and wasted no time in detonating the nuclear payload, blowing up the entire Cobra base along with Xamot. And that was that. Tomax was left as the lone surviving Paoli twin, psychologically scarred by the death of his brother. The psychic link died and faded away, and Tomax became a hollow shell of the man he once was. He did try to rebuild Cobra as a legitimate security firm, but my guy just never truly recovered from the loss. What we love about the IDW continuity is that it gave us a much darker version of the twins, which we actually think does them more justice. We've seen the cartoony, over-the-top versions in the Sunbow series, and we've seen the Marvel Comics version too, but this one's different from the very beginning. It gives us a backstory that already sets up certain expectations and characteristics for the twins, and then shatters all of it with just one incident. Here, the Paoli brothers are full front and center, and it's this hauntingly tragic story. The comics also do a great job of telling it. The moment I read that first issue, I knew I was in for the long run, and I was going to love it.
I am Tomax. And I am Xamot. We are the Brothers of Light.
Renegades rebuilds them as the Brothers of Light. Now, this one takes a completely different turn. In G.I. Joe Renegades, Tomax and Xamot are no longer corporate executives, but rather they're psychic spiritual cult leaders. Sounds crazy, right? They're called the Brothers of Light, and there's an episode with that same name that shows us what these two actually do. The episode opens with a bunch of Joes in their truck encountering a woman who seems like she's in shock. They take her with them so she can get checked by a doctor, and that's when they see a weird symbol on her clothing. Think Illuminati plus Eye of Horus. And that's when they also stumble upon this very sign on the road. They approach the compound and are stopped by a man in reddish-maroon robes who identifies the woman as Sister Leia. He also refers to certain masters, and no points for guessing it's the twins. As the main doors open, through rays of blinding light, Tomax and Xamot emerged. And this time they're not wearing suits, but rather more traditional clothing. Oh, and fun fact, this time it's Tomax who has the scar on his face. When describing their desert oasis, they frame it as a place where they help those who feel lost in darkness find their light. They're healers of the mind and the soul. Sounds kinda sus, right? Well, we get to see their true colors pretty soon. See, when the bell sounds for their evening meal, the brothers tell the Joes they can stay the night at their complex. Of course, the Joes refuse because, firstly, they have other work, and secondly, this place was creepy as hell. But then, the brothers reveal their psychic hypnotic powers as they speak in unison, looking Joe directly in his eyes, convince him to stay the night. As they enter their abode, they saw a huge-ass feast laid out for them, along with some pretty comfy-looking beds. But you feel the eeriness in every frame as the brothers bid them goodnight, tell them to sleep well, the most sinister tone possible. You can feel the dread when they close the door and walk away, as if they've somehow trapped the Joes, which, I mean, I guess they have. And only one of the Joes, Tunnel Rat, really notices how eccentric and weird the brothers are. The next morning, the Joes are out on a walk with the brothers, and they once again show their psychic powers as they already know the names of Duke and Scarlet. They're like in full-on manipulation mode here as they actively try to brainwash the Joes. They also reveal that their psychic connection is once again alive and well. It even extends to psychic empathy, where if one feels pain, so too does the other. Now, turns out Dr. Mindbender is also on the way here since he's frantically looking for true psychics who can help him create his bio-vipers. And he's being followed by Snake Eyes. Guess everyone's gonna have a reunion at the Brother of Light's compound, right? Eventually, the Joes walk into the Temple of Light to get completely and entirely brainwashed as Tunnel Rat stands lookout. And this is where things get interesting. Tunnel Rat is signaled by Sister Leia, who warns him to stay away from the temple. By this time, Dr. Mindbender has also arrived, and unfortunately, the Joes have already been hypnotized by the light. Before we know it, so is Mindbender. They're all finishing each other's sentences and whatnot, but the best part is that the brothers aren't just looking for mind control, they're actually still as enterprising as ever. They get the brainwashed Mindbender to access Cobra bank accounts and send them all sorts of money. I guess they want both power as well as the big bucks. By this time, Snake Eyes has also arrived and has been captured by a hypnotized roadblock. He too seemingly gets brainwashed. Tunnel Rat is thrown into prison with Sister Leia. This is when Leia reveals that even with her, all the brothers wanted was her trust fund. Oh, also, of course, Snake Eyes was able to resist the light and came and released Tunnel Rat. In the meantime, Tomax and Xamot officially inaugurate their new army, Crimson Guard, with Duke, Roadblock, and Scarlet as the first 3 members. But of course, Snake Eyes and Tunnel Rat save the day, ambushing the inauguration ceremony and destroying the mesmerizing light. They also managed to keep the twins apart for long enough to snap the Joes out of their mind control. Turns out, the twins were that strong because they were together. The farther apart they got, the weaker their powers became. The twins, with nowhere left to go, destroy the compound and run to Mindbender for help, requesting he take them away on his helicopter. They strike a deal where Mindbender would save them, and in return, they would tell him all about their powers. I mean, come on, how naive can you get? By the end of the episode, they were both strapped, cuffed, locked, and experimented upon by Mindbender to improve his bio-vipers and create the new Shadow Vipers who would be mentally commanded by Storm Shadow. Then, finally, in the episode Union of the Snake, Cobra tries to use the twins' powers to control the minds of various telecommunication company heads, but they're stopped by the Joes. This gives the twins the perfect opportunity to escape. Hell, they even take revenge on Mindbender by mesmerizing him and the Baroness to fight each other as they slip past. This version of Tomax and Xamot still carries the power and influence of previous versions, just channeled in a different way, and we actually really like that. It's like the same characters, but in a new costume. Now, I gotta warn you, this next version of the twins is pretty niche and pretty crazy. The Cyborg Twin Horror. This is from the G.I. Joe vs. the Transformers comics, and here we get to see a cyborg version of Tomax and Xamot. I know, it sounds completely unhinged, but let me explain. You see, when Cobra discovered a damaged Teletran 3 and several deactivated Transformers left behind on Earth, they utilized the technology to the fullest. The twins are put in charge of figuring out how to incorporate Cybertronian tech into human biology, and they very much succeed. They themselves undergo a procedure that turns them into cyborgs and enhances their physical stats a shit ton. The process also strengthened the connection between them, and they developed a new ability called the Unity. With this power, whenever they physically touched, usually by joining or linking hands, they would pretty much act like a battery and generate and conduct Cybertronian energy, which allowed them to fire these massive destructive biochemical energy blasts that could probably even take down a Transformer. And we get to see a glimpse of these modifications and enhancements in Volume 2, Issue 3 of this comic, as the twins use the Unity move to fire 2 simultaneous blasts. But once again, Devil's Due Publishing took a similar route to IDW. During a 3-way battle between the twins, the Joes, and the Decepticon Shockwave, the twins tried to use their Unity move, but Shockwave predicted it and found his moment for a precise shot. And what did he do? He didn't try to attack them both, he singled out Tomax with one fatal blast. And as you can already imagine, with their psychic powers amplified so significantly by the Cybertronian enhancements, Xamot must have felt every single second of his brother's death. He survived, but at what cost? The series ended with him mourning his brother as he was left behind, alone and broken. Honestly, these endings where one of the twins dies are always so heartbreaking, but hopefully we're ending on a better note, a story that's still technically in progress. Energon Universe. Yep, last but not least, we've got the Energon Universe comics that are still developing their version of Tomax and Xamot, but fortunately, we got to see a little bit of them in the Destro miniseries. They're Tomax and Xamot Paoli, the twin heads of extensive enterprises and rival weapons dealers to Destro and his company, Mars. And their competition with Destro low-key gets out of hand when Destro mistakenly blames them for attacking his weapons expo at Darklonia. Of course, it wasn't actually them, but that suspicion was enough to rile up both sides, and even in this comic, the brothers are as opportunistic as ever. When Destro is attacked and goes MIA, everyone assumes he's dead, and the Paoli twins take advantage of the situation and go straight to Darklonia to get their hands on Mars Industries to take it over from Destro's cousin, Artyom Darklon. Surprisingly, Darklon just gives it up to them. Of course, they waste no time and immediately go and strike up a partnership with Cobra Commander, and all seems to be going well for the brothers before Destro shows up from the dead to claim what's rightfully his. He's absolutely ruthless and pretty much destroys the twins before ultimately suggesting that they all work together, including the commander, but of course, he's in charge. Duh. Then, the twins also appear in the current G.I. Joe run as active Cobra members. And this time, they're not just international weapons dealers who sit on the sidelines, or CEOs only meant for their ivory towers. They're actively on the field and even manage to one-up Duke and the Baroness with their accurate shots. But it's important to note here that we don't really get to see full, complete versions of them yet. We're not really looking at a finished version, but more of a story that's unfolding in real time, and that's kind of exciting. I do hope we get to see some backstory, as unlikely as it is, but nonetheless, they're still pretty entertaining in the panels, so we're not complaining. And with that, we've come to the end of all the origins and storylines of the Paoli twins, and though they're all slightly different from one another, they still maintain a few things in common. These two brothers are always the epitome of control, power, and influence, whether in a corporate suit or Cobra costumes, or even spiritual robes. And no matter what they are or what they're doing, one thing doesn't change: their psychic connection. The link between them is one of the most central points of almost every story and every continuity, and that's what sets them apart from all the other Cobra characters. Even when their origins are vague and mysterious, they're defined by their psychic brotherly bond, one that can make them or even break them. So what do you guys think about this evil twin duo? Which continuity was your favorite, and which one did you like the least? Let us know in the comments down below, and as always, don't forget to smash the like button if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more G.I. Joe content like this. Otherwise, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and we'll see you in the next one.